Commentate about some of the major stories to keep an eye on. The state of our big parastatals is never far from the headlines, with many facing challenges that are hugely consequential for this economy. So today, for Political View, we're joined by the Mail and Guardian's investigations editor, Thanduxolo Jika, who's with us in the studio. Good evening to you, and thank you for joining us.
Good evening to you.
I suppose the first place to start is this new forensic report by Treasury, and it calls fingers quite specifically the former Eskom CFO Anuj Singh, and in fact it's on the back of another Treasury report from last year.
Yeah, I mean the report is quite scathing. It not only talks about how due processes were not followed in the procurement process, both at Transnet and at Eskom. It goes further to show that there were issues of gratification, particularly at Transnet when it comes to Anuj Singh, who was the CFO there.
By gratifications, you mean these trips?
These trips overseas.
Quite coincidentally close to when contracts are given to different people.
Yeah, McKinsey then gets contracts at Transnet. The contracts, they do not go out on tender. The value of the contracts gets increased without any other bidders being given a chance. So I mean that on its own raises quite a lot of questions, which quite rightly Treasury has asked the Hawks to investigate such.
Yeah, there is this recommendation by the Hawks to look into this matter, specifically, of course, what is it, the legislation, the Prevention and Combating of Corrupt Activities Act. What does that do to Anuj Singh? How much trouble could he find himself in?
Well, he's in quite a lot of trouble. I mean, that act, PRECA is quite specific on what is gratification, what corruption is, accepting donations, favors, trips. It's quite an extensive act which has not been really implemented by our law enforcement agencies quite a lot. I mean, there's other charges that you could face, but on the face of it, when you look at the Prevention and Combating of Corrupt Activities Act, he's got a case to answer. And also other executives, not only at Transnet, but the former CEO at both Transnet and Eskom, Brian Molefe, their involvement in the Tegeta deal for South Africans to buy the Gupta's really, the Optimum mine. The report speaks about how negotiations were already taking place before the 600 million prepayment was given to the Guptas. So these things went to the board just to be rubber stamped, really. So the report confirms what we already have reported about in the state capture, through the emails, and prior the emails.
Is there a sense of vindication for you? Because, of course, you've been part of a network of investigative journalists that have looked into these matters, and there were constant denials. I mean, we even heard people like former Minister Lynn Brown saying that no evidence had been placed before her. Is this a vindication for all the work that so many have been doing to uncover all of this?
It's certainly, for me, a vindication for those who lost their jobs, who, sources to many of us as journalists, those that were punished for trying to actually expose what was happening within these parastatals. And of course, I mean, for us, I remember vividly, when we wrote a story about the prepayment and the McKinsey contracts together with Trillion at Eskom. Eskom denied that there was ever a contract with McKinsey and Trillion, and a statement was issued. But now they later said that statement was sanctioned by Anuj Singh, and that Anuj Singh and Minister Lynn Brown at the time said she was misled by Anoj.
I want to quickly talk to you about the PAC, but before I do that, perhaps one more on Anoj Singh. We know, of course, that he made particular statements to Parliament, which now, of course, based on what we're hearing in these reports, suggests that some of those would be untrue. He was given a list of questions to answer. Has he explained himself?
Well, look, I contacted Anoj Singh on Sunday, and most of the people mentioned in that document were only given their report on Friday. Anoj Singh said he hasn't seen the report and he was not willing to comment on it.
So not quite a parastatal, but 2 trillion rands of public servants' money. The PIC has also been making headlines for all the wrong reasons. Now, you're saying that the CEO, Dan Matjila, is not going to go anywhere, at least not for now.
Yeah, you know, he can't. Right now, what the board is actually faced with is they can't charge him based on they can't suspend him based on the allegations that were raised last year, because the board itself had cleared him of those charges. So now the question is, how are they going to proceed with the investigation? And of course, I mean, you would have seen that the current chairperson of the PIC, Mondli Gungubela, the deputy finance minister, in his court papers against the application by UDM's leader Olumisa, I mean, he came out quite hard and said he was actually shocked at how the matter against Dan Matjila was treated. There
seems to have been some confusion around whether or not the current finance minister and his deputy, as you say, the chair of the PIC, are actually on the same page on this matter. What's your reading of that?
Well, when I read the court documents, one is coming as a chairperson of the PIC, and quite correctly, the Minister of Finance at some point, I mean, he pointed out that he would be interfering with the matters at PIC if he was to take action. Hence, he has recommended a commission of inquiry, and that a forensic investigation be a forensic investigation should take place.
Surely that's the thing that needs to be done to put all of these... I mean, we go back to Malusi Gigaba. He also called for some investigations into this. What's going on?
Well, it seems as if, you know, the board is divided. It seems as if some in the board felt that even at that time, I mean, there was a minority view that how they dealt with the Dan Matjila allegations was quite not right. But the majority seemed to have protected Dan Matjila at the time. So it's a worrying situation, but the Commission of Inquiry and a forensic investigation should be able to clear these matters. But the question is also about the PIC and the investments that they have made. Were they correct? Particularly when it comes to the issue of VBS, where were governance processes there?
Well, we're certainly going to need clarity on this, because, of course, Minister Nene has also been quoted as, at least sources have been saying that he wants the entire PIC to be investigated. Final one for you that you must be keeping an eye on. Today's ANC Lekgotla, what are your thoughts on that?
Well, I mean, you know, one is expecting that with the Lekgotla, the issue of the economy would come up. Remember also alliance partners have raised an issue about VAT, that perhaps it should be reviewed. And also, I mean, elections would obviously be part of their main agenda. I would assume that, you know, they would want, some of them are not happy with the involvement of former President Jacob Zuma as a person who campaigns for the ANC, particularly in the background of what he allegedly said, that people must vote for Mqetama. So, but they're not happy, some of their alliance partners. So those issues would be dealt with, one would expect. And certainly the issue of the economy, the increase in terms of fuel, which, I mean, correctly so, they say, you know, there's not much that can be done. But the issue of VAT, alliance partners want answers there.
I mean, of course, I imagine a big part of the discussion is going to be at the rising cost of living in South Africa. And of course, you mentioned VAT, but also the fuel price.
The fuel price issue has been, their biggest problem. But I mean, as they correctly point out, it's a global issue. But they need to come up with solutions as to how then, do you inject something into the economy? Because the issue is the cost of living is rising. So you need to have alternatives when it comes to the economy, and to inject the economy. I mean, of course, I mean, they're talking about big investments, etc. But those are long-term goals. But short-term, mid-term, what really happens? They need to give answers as to really what happens for the rest of the South African population.
All right, we'll have to leave it there with you, Thanduxolo Jika. Of course, the Mail and Guardian's investigations editor with us in studio for this Monday's Political View, looking at the major stories for you to keep an eye on in terms of what's dominating headlines around our